today, I promise that we're going to have a little bit easier time sharing, and we'll have a little bit easier time covering this material because um, we have what I've got planned is doable. The last couple weeks, it was a little pushing a little bit. So let me just let some more people in, which is great. And I'm going to show right as we start, because I don't want to forget, and Ariel asked, and I think it's an important thing. I'm going to take you through how to see the classes that
First time
have
introducing the calendar.
passed, which are only two. So if you have, this is your first time, you don't have to worry about missing something because you only missed two classes. Um, but hold it a second. I need to, and I have this, like I said, I have these screen extenders, but I'm still playing around with it a little bit. So here's our website. Um, so the Temple Beth and Me website, like this is the homepage. And if you go to TBA online, that's where information about our classes are. So, and technically, by the way, the link to Shabbat. So if you wanted to, or any holiday, if you wanted to follow along with Shabbat, you can do just go like you don't remember what the Facebook page is. Really easy, right? Temple Beth and Me SCV. But if you go to there, the link, and it also has the prayer book, so you could follow along in the prayer book at home. And then it has a link to the previous Shabbat services on our YouTube. Same thing with our Tuesday morning class. It has a link to our Zoom. Actually, should have a link to our YouTube there too. I think yeah, it does here. It has a link to all the TBA stuff there. The classes they're on our channel. Technically, the Shabbats are there too. So there's like two places for it to get to the YouTube channel. But here, if you go to Jewish Journey, which is what we're in right now, there's a link to the Zoom. So if you ever don't know where the link is, it's there.
Oh,
And then you can hit view past classes and materials. And there it is, right there. This is the link to the YouTube. So you can also find it there. It's the same link, but it pops it there. And here are the materials. So you can see the materials that we had that we gave out the first time. Here's the material that we gave out last time. And it's really easy. It's all in one place. We try to make it as simple as possible. I think it shall be easy. Now, you notice that
nice.
today is the 27th, and we will have this posted later tonight. I'm still letting a couple people in. Awesome. And then you can see next week. Now you can see we don't have a class on the 10th because I will be out of town on the 10th, but and I'll actually be on a plane during that time. But I will, as I mentioned last time, if I'm able to, and if I'm in a time zone that's not crazy, we will have classes virtually. I'll be able to do what I'm doing right now in another place, which is what we did for 2 years during COVID. We did these classes online. I did them usually from my home, and so we don't have a class the night of the 10th. But other than that, for the next few weeks, and again coming up during our holidays, we're actually going to miss one class for Rosh Hashanah, but or during the holidays. But actually, it's Yom Kippur. But for the most part, again, every week we're going to be we're going to be going through the material, and it'll be posted up, and the class will be posted up hopefully that night. So let's get into the calendar because tonight we're talking about the Jewish calendar, and it's a great. Oh, there they are, the Stolmans. They made it. We can start. We're actually. I was stalling for you guys. So no, it's wonderful to have. We have a bunch of people online, and we have a bunch of people. We got maybe a little bit more online than in person, but we have a lot in person, which is great. So we're talking about the calendar today, and we're not talking about the elements of the calendar, which is again why I think we can get done with with a little bit more relaxation than I did the last couple of weeks, trying to talk about 3,000 years of Jewish theology in 90 minutes. Literally 3,000 years. Normally, again, when we talk about history, some of those will be obviously multi class, multi classes. But talking about tonight is more of an overview of the calendar, and then we're going to go into the elements of the calendar coming up. So next week we're going to talk about Shabbat, and then the class after that on the 17th we're going to be talking about the holidays and going through the holidays. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be one night, but it might be two. The holidays, I don't quite have that. Shabbat is definitely going to be. We're going to be talking about it one night, but that'll be next week. But we are going to talk about them in a general sense today and how they fit in, obviously, in the Jewish calendar. But today it's kind of an overview. It's more of a discussion today about the why the calendar is the way it is, right? Why the calendar kind of originated the way it is, how it came to us. You know, for thousands of years, Jewish people, the calendar has been for us. The Jewish calendar has been one of the defining things that makes us what we are. It's been said, and we're going to look at it in a moment, that Abraham Joshua Heschel, a rabbi, a great rabbi of the last century, said that Judaism is a religion of time, aiming at the sanctification of time. And he wrote that in a book that I have, small book, very small book. I could lose this book because it's so tiny. It's called Shabbat, the Sabbath, actually. It's called the Sabbath. Its meaning for modern man. And it came out, Heschel died in the mid 70s, but he was the rabbi for, came out, he published it first in 1951. This is not a normal, it's more of a series of paragraphs, little kind of mini essays. It's not a book in a conventional sense. Heschel was more of a philosopher and a theologian than a kind of a normal kind of teaching rabbi. He really influenced a lot of Judaism of the last century, and he was most well known really for his advocacy and for his leadership, because he's the rabbi who was very close to Abraham Joshua Heschel and Martin Luther King were very close. And so whenever you see the white-haired and white-bearded rabbi marching with King, it's Abraham Joshua Heschel. Heschel was close with other rabbis, but I mean, King was close with other rabbis, but Heschel was really the closest. So the school that I went to, Heschel Day School, there's another one in New York, which it's completely separate. The Heschel School in New York is also a Jewish day school, but started after ours. Our school was named after Heschel. Originally, it was called the Valley Jewish Day School in 1970, whatever, when it started, 72. But they changed the name of it to Heschel in like 79, 77, 79, something like that. I think with the hope that some of the people that really loved Heschel would donate money to it. It never happened. And so the school ended up getting named after him, and it never really made sense. I mean, from the standpoint that Heschel was a hero because he marched with King, I guess there was that. And so, Heschel was always very proud of, having a kind of a focus towards being concerned with the wider community and not being insular and trying to be. I would say Heschel, the school is still known as not a very religious school. I'd say it's kind of the least religious Jewish day school. That's probably not true anymore, but at the time it was the least religious day school, Jewish day school in California, and probably one of the least in the country. And that's not like I'm bragging about that. I'm just saying because I was one of the first students there. But I will tell you that it was kind of strange that it was attached to that. But look, one of the most influential day schools now in Los Angeles is the Milken School, which is named after Michael Milken, so the Milken family. So I don't know. If you asked me, I'd still rather be named after Heschel. But he gave a lot of money, Milken, and he's still alive, and he's gave a lot of money to prostate cancer research, a lot of money, and he's helped a lot of people survive prostate cancer. So yeah, he went to jail and he committed crimes, but he served his time, I guess you could say. And anyway, it's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about holidays and the Sabbath and our conception of time. So I got off topic, but it's an important question, and it's one of early Jewish history, I would say too. I know, but it required a little bit more information. All right. So here's a piece of art by Mordechai Rosenstein. I always loved this piece. It was my aunt and uncle's. And I don't know, a couple of years ago, they got rid of it. It's now in our house. So this is in our downstairs area. We have two Rosenstein paintings. This is one. This is his picture, his version of the zodiac, the Jewish calendar, with the months in the center around a Kabbalistic kind of inspired line, geometrical pattern of a Jewish star with the phases of the moon, right? And then around it, the zodiac with symbols of the zodiac that also kind of reflect the holidays to some extent. We'll talk about that in a moment because you can see the Aries Nissan has a matzah inside the bull or the ram, sorry. The bull next to it is Taurus. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. And of course, the scales for Tishrei or for the Libra, perfect symbol for thinking about the scales of the universe that we talk about at Rosh Hashanah, where the world is hanging in the balance based on our teshuva, based on our repentance. So that's Libra, by the way, and it was a perfect symbol for us. Anyways, we'll talk about that in a moment. But we're going to talk about the months and the fact that the Jewish calendar is one of the most important things that defines us as Jews. It is one of those things that when we talk about what makes us different, how does Judaism maintain something unique about itself? The calendar is one of those things that again it is, I would say, one of the most distinctive ways. I mean, the Bible we shared with Christians, and now there's a lot of Christians that read the Hebrew Bible. I would think most do, but the Jewish calendar is something that even though there's a lot of interest in it with Christians, and there are some Christian groups that follow the Jewish calendar a little bit more than others, right? The Seventh-day Adventists clearly are one. They celebrate Shabbat on Saturday, but but when we talk about how we how we kind of lay out um, our calendar is known for its um, known for its attention to the um, attention to the seasons, but at the same time, there's some things that are going on here. Everybody can see this. This is a little chart that you can download. The Hebrew months, the months that we have, actually go back to the Babylonian experience. Interestingly, the months in the Hebrew Bible, we don't have the months named in the Hebrew Bible. There are actually 4 months that are named in the Hebrew Bible, but none of them are named these names. So these names come from the Babylonians. The names for our months come from the Babylonians. They're Babylonian names. I mean, they're the months that they called them. We had months in the Hebrew Bible. They're just called different names. And the reason for that is that during the early biblical period, uh, our Bible reflects actually a slightly different calendar than the one we follow now. And Mike knows about this. I think he's already going to laugh because I've talked about it so many times over the years. The Bible follows actually more of a solar calendar, which was the Egyptian influence on us. All of kind of the approaches that I want to talk about as far as probably most things, Judaism never is in a vacuum, right? We're always influenced by people around us. And the same thing that we kind of deal with today when it comes to influences from outside, our ancestors did too. And so originally in the Bible, we have a reflection of the calendar beginning, Mike, in springtime, right? Right? In Nisan, exactly. In Nisan. And so that's why here at the top, the first month in the Bible, it says, is actually in the Bible, it says Aviv, but again, the Babylonian name for it is Nisan. It's the month that we celebrate Passover. Um, and it usually falls for us on the Gregorian calendar a much newer calendar, a much newer version of the calendar for human beings than we'd like to probably recognize, because one of the things we don't talk about very much is that our calendar in the West is fairly new. We didn't adopt this calendar until a couple of hundred years ago. For most of human history, every culture, every community, every civilization, if you will, ran on its own calendar. We have not been on calendar systems that line up with each other until really the last couple of hundred years. Yeah. It's a lunar solar mix. Yeah, I'm going to get to that. And I'll explain why it has to. Well, in literally just a moment. But for us in the biblical period, our holidays and our calendar, the way the calendar is kind of given to us, is it says it starts in the springtime. Again, one of the reasons why I was so glad we did this class now is because we're coming up on Rosh Hashanah. And you're going, isn't that the beginning of the Jewish year? And the answer is yes. But that's because of the Babylonians. And that was not the way it was in the Torah. So something happened between the Torah time and the rabbis, the rabbinic time, that allowed for this change to happen. Well, we know because we know the Babylonians had this calendar, and we know the Egyptians had that calendar, and we know that the more we were under the Babylonian influence, we adopted that calendar. Today, and again, so as I was saying, everybody had different calendars. And the fact that the Egyptians and the Babylonians had different calendars was nothing compared to what happened throughout much of the world, because every kingdom essentially ran its own calendar. And the calendars would go back to when that dynasty started. So when a new dynasty would start, there'd be a new calendar, be a new year for that dynasty. And that happened over and over and over again throughout human history. And every place where the Jews lived, they were to some extent subject to that craziness. So when did it stop? So I want to get to that point because I didn't mention it, and sometimes get a little off. It didn't. We didn't have a unified worldwide calendar really until the 1800s, and the reason we did had really less to do with the fact that like we wanted everyone to get together and agree on this, but we had to. And what made it happen was worldwide transportation. To have a train schedule between countries, to have a ship that you book a ticket on, which we didn't have until, you know, you and I think that, everybody always had the ability to buy a ticket and go on a journey. Even if they went on a ship, they'd buy a ticket. Not really, not until about 200 years ago. Because when the Mayflower people got here, they didn't come on the Mayflower because they had a ticket. They chartered the Mayflower. They rented out the ship, and everybody who was going on that little journey from Plymouth, from England to Massachusetts, they were booked together. They didn't have a ticket. It wasn't like the Mayflower had, other passengers on it. These people were all traveling together. And that's the way people traveled for most of human history. It's what happens in the book of Jonah. You can see Jonah is on a ship that he didn't have it. He chartered it. He paid these guys to take him to the next place. It seems like he chartered the whole ship actually. But that's what changed. Needing to have a calendar that we could then tell people this is when your ship is going to arrive, and this is when your train is supposed to arrive. That's how this all got started, and we take it for granted today, but that's not the way most of human history went. John. It's just no, it's just fact. I mean, it's like when this happened, the people who were most affected by it, started dealing with it the way they had to deal with it. But in the Bible, in the Talmud, throughout most of our early writings, they didn't even have a consensus on how long a day was. I mean, they knew a day was 24 hours, or they knew it was section. They could sectionalize it, But the amount of time that somebody slept for was it's dark out. And so during the summer, the daytime was the hours were longer because they said, okay, well, we have 7 periods that you're going to work. Well, those 7 periods are now an hour and a half, when during the winter they would be 45 minutes. So it's crazy that, like we talk about hours today, but there really was no, even within a community, it changed depending on the year. So the whole concept of like time being set, you got to realize most of human history, that wasn't the case. Yeah, Philip. Yep. That's about 100, little over 100 years ago, about 100 years, 120 years ago. Yeah. And again, partly was because, how would anybody know, until there was a railroad and telegraph, people really didn't know. And they knew about time. They knew time difference. Look, in the Talmud, we know that they understood, and we're going to mention in a second, they knew that when it was dark or that, let's put it this way, when it was light in Israel, it might already be dark in Babylonia. They knew the sun moved across the sky. And so they knew that the time was, different in different parts of the world. Again, you don't have to have a conception even of a round planet in order to have that idea. But they didn't understand times. They understood that the sun was in different places in different parts of the world. And that obviously was important because the sun really is part of the focus of this. But let's look at our calendar, because again, we're going to talk about these holidays in the coming weeks. We're not next week we're talking about Shabbat, but then after that we're going to get into these holidays. So we're not going to delve into what these holidays are, but I want you to see the most important part is when these holidays fall, because they fall during certain seasons, and the seasons are critical because the holidays have to come in certain seasons in our tradition. And that's not the case in every tradition. I'm going to get to that. I know that sounds crazy, but trust me, this is why our calendar is so amazing. So we have the holidays of springtime, which again in the Bible, these are the first holidays, and then we move into the summertime, where we really don't have many holidays during the summer. And as we move out of the summer and again into autumn, which we're about to get into, that's where we have these holidays that we call the high holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah. The next month after this busy month of holidays is Cheshvan, which is normally October, November. No holidays then. And then we get into the winter and we start getting into these other holidays like Hanukkah, which technically, usually begins in November, December, but oftentimes, as it did last year, ends in January. And then we get into Tu B'Shvat, and then the last holidays of the year, which is Purim. Now, of course, Purim we don't think of as the last holiday of the year anymore, but during the biblical times, during the time when Purim was first celebrated, it was really an end of the year, end of winter, beginning of spring holiday. And it coincided, coincidentally, not really, with Nowruz, which is Persian New Year, which is the last remnant that kind of we come in contact with of a civilization of a civilization that followed springtime as the beginning of the year. Most of the people who followed springtime as the beginning of the year were pagan, later adopters of Christianity, and they did not build their calendar around the Romans the way the early church did. And some of you know this. The last peoples, whether they were Vikings or people in northern parts of the Baltics, they were some of the last parts of the European continent to adopt Christianity, even in the 12th and 13th century, right? The Vikings were still pagan into the 9th and 10th centuries. The church and Christians who had already adopted the Julian calendar, a calendar that starts in the wintertime, made fun of those pagans. And that is the origin, my friends, of April Fool's Day, because they made fun of the people that were still celebrating the springtime. Now, for us, the springtime was definitely important, and that's why our calendar had this beginning, and we have to acknowledge it. We can't not, you can't say, well, you know, we don't really follow it anymore. It's Rosh Hashanah because the Bible tells us that it is. So when we first encounter the calendar in the Torah, which I'm going to show you right now, the calendar tells the Torah tells us again that our calendar starts in in the springtime at Passover, and that kind of kicks off our year. So here is the line from Leviticus where we get the first kind of comprehensive view of the holidays. It's not the first time we get it to some extent because we do get in Exodus chapter 12, you celebrate Passover at the beginning of the year. So Exodus chapter 12 already tells us that there's a beginning of the year. But here we get another list in the book of Numbers, and we get another list, or not a list, but kind of a summary of the holidays in the book of Deuteronomy. But here in Leviticus, the first time is where in the third book of the Torah, we get this line, right? Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, these are my fixed times, the times of Adonai, which you shall proclaim as sacred occasions. So this is the line that essentially says, hey, these are the holidays. These are the days that are my days. And this is God saying it, right? This is more, God telling Moses to say it. And of course, the first holiday that's introduced to us is Shabbat, the one that happens the most, happens every week. And you can see it's listed as a holiday. It's right here. These are my fixed times, my Mikre Kodesh. These are my Moadai, the Moed, the fixed occasions, the sacred occasions. So Shabbat is the first, and we're going to talk about Shabbat next week. The whole session is talking about Shabbat. Yes. Yes. Yeah, but to some extent, it's because Genesis is about our families, and it doesn't really deal with the laws. Exodus deals with the Exodus, and then finally, when we get into Leviticus, we get this, and this is right after. This was not Sam's portion, but right after it. It's the portion. It's Parshat Emor. We're going to talk about. Oh, and happy birthday to Philip today. Philip's birthday today, right? Some of you guys got to see Philip a couple weeks ago at the beach. So Shabbat is the first. Then it comes into the first holiday, which is Passover. Look, it says these are the times that that are once a year, and the first one's Passover, which happens, of course, at the 14th, which is full moon. Full moon. Full moon. So our holidays always come, or almost always come, either at a Rosh Chodesh where there's no moon, and I'll get to Rosh Chodesh in a second, or they come when there's a full moon. So the moon is still very important to these holidays, but as you can see, they have to be in a certain month, and of course, as I kind of showed you, they're going to have to be in a certain season. So here's a little bit about Passover. I don't want to talk about the holidays. I don't want to talk about Passover because we're going to talk about it when we get to the holidays. But we have pointed this out before. There seem to be two Passover holidays. One that's the 14th day of the month, which was a Passover offering, and one that was the holiday of Matzot, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I promise I will get to this when we talk about Passover. But there seems to be originally two holidays that were combined together. A holiday of Passover and a holiday of Matzot. Interesting, right? You never knew that. Then, so this is all about Passover. And then it gets into Shavuot. And this is the time of offering up another sacrifice. All right. And then we get into, and there's Shavuot. And then we get into the next holiday, which is the seventh month. That is Rosh Hashanah. You blow, they don't even call it Rosh Hashanah. It says it's a day of rest and you have loud blasts, right? Don't work. Then 10 days later, which is the only one of the only holidays that has nothing to do with the moon. Nothing to do with the moon. Talk about it when we get to Yom Kippur, when we get to the holidays. It says you practice self-denial, etc. That's the only one that doesn't has really nothing to do with the moon. It's not on the 1st or the 14th. The next is that's all about Yom Kippur. The next is the 15th day of the month, Sukkot, another full moon. This has got interesting, right? This is going to get interesting because look how long the description of Sukkot is. It starts in verse 34. I don't want to spend, like I said, I keep saying I'm not going to talk about it, but you're going to get to it when we talk about Sukkot in a couple weeks. Look how many lines there are about Sukkot. It's 10 lines about Sukkot. There's only, there's only 5 lines. There's only 5 lines about Yom Kippur. There's 10 lines about Sukkot. Pretty important. And then we get into this is all Sukkot still. Yeah, it's even more. Yeah. And that's it. That's it. Um, that's it. Yeah. So it is good to be confused because it's confusing. It is very confusing. The Jewish people, when they were living under the kind of in the early biblical period, they're living under Egyptian influence, and they are, which the Egyptians very focused on the sun. And it's, by the way, it's good to be focused on the sun because the sun's a really good way to keep a calendar. And they are, for the most part, farmers. And so having a seasonal holiday and a calendar based on the sun is critical. Um, when the Jewish people are then exiled and living in Babylonia, they're under a Babylonian influence. The Babylonians worship the moon a little bit more, and they're the first civilization, if you will, to really focus on the creation of a week. There's a theory that that's where we got the concept of Shabbat. That's pretty much been it's pretty much been, but I would say even in the 70s and 80s, there was still this kind of idea that we didn't understand about a week, about a Shabbat until we came into contact with the Babylonians. It's partly because the earliest mentions of Shabbat that are even older than the Bible are in Akkadian, are in Sumerian languages that talk about a Sabbath. But just because it talks about the Sabbath, there doesn't mean that like we didn't have the concept of it. And the Bible seems to have a concept of a Shabbat. And if the Bible was, at least that part of Genesis was written before Jews lived in Babylonia, which we believe, then they didn't get it from the Babylonians. It means that they had it during the time when they were still under Egyptian influence. So there's different theories about how this happened. I think the most logical idea is that the Jews they took on the the traditions of the people, if you will, of who they lived with when they lived with them. And so the idea that they started following it during the Babylonian experience is pretty clear to me. And so by the time they write the Talmud, which is again about 2,000 years ago, so about 1,000 years after Jews were in Egypt, they're in Babylonia. And they're living, a lot of them are living in Babylonia. A lot of them went home. We were talking about it right now in the book of Ezra. So if you want to come on Tuesdays, you'll hear that story. But they took on a lot of the Babylonian traditions and customs. And so the customs the Babylonians had when it came to things like Tishrei, which is their month of the fall, this month that's coming up upon us, they talked about things that are very similar. The Babylonians were the first people to assign a planet to each one of the days. In those days, there were 7 planets. Each planet had a day. It was the Babylonians who did that. Of course, then the Greeks did it, and then then we had influence by the those same Vikings that were kind of late to the Christian party. Were had a big impact on the Germans and on the Germanic influence. It's why we still call Tuesday after the gods and goddesses of the Norse, Woden, Odin, and on Wednesday, and Thor on Thursday. I mean, but the people who first did that were the Babylonians. They were the ones who introduced these 7 days that had a god and a planet, if you will, assigned to them. All of it came out of the Babylonians. And the Babylonians were really known for being the top astronomers of the time. I know you've heard the Egyptians were great astronomers. They were. They were. But a lot of their stuff was based around the sun and the position of the sun, which is really important. Bless you. It's really important and it's really great, but it's only so effective. And this is the point that I want you to hear. The sun is great if you have great skills at predicting where the sun is, which the Egyptians did, and they monitored it for centuries before they, started lining stuff up and telling people and writing it down and all those great things that you see in Indiana Jones, where the sun, was going to open up that thing. They knew that stuff, but it's really bad way to mark time when you don't have those devices. The moon makes a lot more sense. Why? Because you go outside, look at the moon, and every 29 days, the moon goes up and down. And what's really cool about it is each phase of the moon lasts roughly a week. And so through the 4 cycles, the 4 phases of the moon, you can see your calendar go back and forth, and you don't need any device to do it. So it's a really great way. The sun is very hard to calculate what day of the week it is. I mean, you have to be really, really smart and really knowledgeable to know, based on the sun's position, what month it is. There are people who can do that, but most people can't, especially nowadays. If you were a ship's captain, 400 years ago, you probably were pretty good at it. Most of us don't know how to do that. But the sun is a great way of marking time because you need it. Why? And this is the other important thing you have to remember about the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is a lunar solar calendar, which means it's not purely solar and it's not purely lunar. Our months follow, as I told you, the Babylonian lunar months. But there's a problem. The lunar calendar is 11 days short of the solar calendar. So we have 365 days on the solar calendar, which allows us to keep time. And of course, it's roughly 365.4, which is why we have a leap day, a leap month, right? I mean, a leap year, every 4 years, that allows us to have that day to catch up. But the Jewish calendar on a purely lunar cycle would be 354 days, which means that we have to have that extra month added. So yes, it's very confusing, Ariel, because what we have every about 3 years is the extra month of Adar. It's called Adar Sheni. And you could have a birthday in Adar Sheni, and you only have a birthday every 3 years. No, you celebrate it in Adar. And of course, we have a holiday in Adar, which is Purim, which means when we have 2 months of Adar, we actually celebrate it in the second Adar. We celebrate it in the second version of these decisions were made by the rabbinic period. Now, the Jews were not the only people holding on to a lunar calendar, right? Because the Babylonians were, and the Romans and the Greeks and the people that were going, yeah, but we got to kind of follow what the Egyptians did and what makes sense from the time of like, hey, look, this is scientific. We got to keep our years rolling. We got to keep them at the right time. is they created a system for adding that extra month, and it's called the Metonic system. So you can hear it. Metonic is a Greek word. The system basically has 7 years out of 19 years have the extra Adar. And it's set. It's a 19-year cycle. So we've known for centuries what years are Adar have the extra Adar. It's not a secret. It's not like, is it this year? We know years in advance. That's why you can get a calendar of yard sites, which I'm going to mention in a moment, that have the yard sites for the next 75 years. We know when those years are going to be. They're on a 19-year cycle, which means, by the way, that every 19 years, your Hebrew date of birth and your secular date line up. So when you're 57, oh, that's me. I get the same birthday. Av was the same day. Now, my birthday is usually around the beginning of Av on the Hebrew calendar, but it also means that every 19 years, your yard site date will line up as the same day. Any Hebrew date, and I'll get to that where you can find it very easily, the Hebrew date and your English date line up. There's one caveat. It'll be one day off if that year is a leap year on the secular calendar. But for the most part, you're going to have it line up. And maybe it'll be a day off, but it'll line up every 19 years. So you're 38, 57, etc. You get a lineup of your Hebrew and secular. I don't know what that means to you. I don't know if anyone's going to be excited about that, but that's the Metonic calendar. So it actually works beautifully, and it's worked for centuries. And it allows us to have our holidays in the right seasons because Passover has to be in the spring. It says it's the holiday of the spring. It has to be in the spring. The problem is if we didn't have this leap month, this extra month, right? If it's 11 days shy, every 3 years, you get an extra month. It's going to balance out. But if we didn't, it would regress every year. Exactly, Mike. So that's exactly what I'm getting to. So the Muslim calendar, which is very much based on the Babylonian calendar as well, it's a truly lunar calendar. It's not a lunar solar calendar like we have. It's a pure lunar calendar. Every Muslim year is 354 days, which means every year it regresses by 11 days, which means that sometimes, basically every 3 years, Ramadan is a month earlier. Now who cares? Well, it makes a big difference. If you're a Muslim living in, let's say, America or England, where you don't want Ramadan during the summer, you want it during the winter. If you can't eat during the day, you want the daytime to be as short as possible. When Ramadan's during the winter, it's great. When Ramadan's in the summer, you're fasting for 15. I mean, you could be a Muslim now. There's a bunch of Muslims living in Sweden right now. They don't eat during the summer when Ramadan. I mean, you basically don't eat for a month. You have like 3 or 4 hours a day that you can eat. So it becomes a problem. Partly, again, it was not a problem for Muslims for most of their history because most Muslims were in the area near the equator and kind of the tropics. It wasn't an issue because the calendar, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, the day is roughly the same around the equator, right? It's when you get, into the closer to the poles that days really get longer, which is why you have really long days in the summer in Alaska and, similarly in the winter in New Zealand, why it's very long days down south. And conversely, during the summer in New Zealand, it's dark a lot. So, yeah, it makes a difference now for people. So, a truly lunar calendar is going to be a problem. It could not work for us. And it didn't it didn't make sense for us when we were just on a solar calendar. So, the change happened. Now, the reality for us as Jews today is it almost doesn't matter because most of us don't even care. We're following our secular calendar. And it's always been the case. There's always been this pull. And as I said, in some cases, it totally shaped our calendar. When we moved from a solar to a lunar calendar, or a lunar, the mixture one, that's a big deal. You would have thought like there had been somebody wrote about it. The Talmud just takes for granted that we're all doing it. But it must have been a big deal. It must have been big for people to do that. And so That was important. That was an important change. But I want to tell you that it's always been an issue. It's always been an issue, our connection to the cultures around us, because look at this. This is the synagogue in Hamat Tiberias, which is in northern Israel, in Tiberias. I showed you the Rosenstein thing where they show the zodiac. This is this is a 6th century synagogue which has the zodiac, and it has the characters of the zodiac. It says you are. Well, you are on the next one. I'm going to show you. The Dagim, Pisces, right? It's written in Hebrew, Dagim, except what really puzzles us. Oh, and by the way, very important, we see the season, right? Right. So this is the season of winter. And so you can see this is unfortunately, somebody built a wall over it, many hundreds of years ago. There's the season. You can see the season of springtime. And you can see there's the Virgin, a Virgo. There's Arya. There's the lion. There's summer. You can see the symbol of summer, right? So you can see that the season is taking those three months. Yes, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the one that you saw. You saw this one, which is, again, this is one of the reasons why I have this. No, we saw this one, which was also a really cool one, which is in Sapori, which also has the zodiac and in Hebrew, and it has the seasons at the bottom. And also, this one has Helios, the sun god, just like the other one did. And let me show you another one, because that's not the only one that had it. You can see this one here in Beit Alpha, also in the north. Yeah. And Joyce Stein posted way long ago, I didn't share it with everybody, that she's like, we saw the zodiac. Yeah. So here it is in Beit Alpha. What's interesting, of course, is this one's really clear, but look at how primitive it looks compared to the other ones, right? It's really wild how mosaics, you can tell that whoever did this mosaic was not quite as good as the other. Well, I don't want to make artistic statements, but this one this one does not quite have the resolution or the representation. Maybe it's more abstract. I don't know. Yes. And so, but the same thing, this one's really clear. And this Beit Alpha is in the same area. These are all in the Galilee. And you can see again in Hebrew, and again you have Helios, the sun god. So you can see however these people kind of incorporated the Greek traditions around them, they had no issue doing it. You'd say, hey, it doesn't quite it doesn't quite look right. It doesn't, because we know as Jews, you're not supposed to have Helios, the sun god. But culturally, it was acceptable. By the way, this last one you can see is written in Greek. Also, by the way, from Israel. This is from another place we went to on our trips. I always like to take people to Beit Shan. This is from Beit Shan, which was a pagan city in the land of Israel during the Greco-Roman period. So this is all Greek to me. No, it's Greek, right? And there's the zodiac, and there's Helios, and not only Helios, Selene, the moon goddess. This is in a church, my friends. That's why it's in Greek, because it's from St. Mary's Church in Beit Shan during the same period, during the Byzantine period. So you can see Christians and Jews. I mean, I don't think this is that different than the one you saw in the synagogue. So Christians and Jews are using very pagan symbols in their calendars, in their reminders. Now, what's interesting here too, to some extent, is that it is very similar to, the other ones we saw. But when we look at the one in Beit Shan, you can see that the emphasis is less on the holidays and less on the seasons. It's not that it's not there, but it is interesting that the seasonal aspect of it is is seems to be again a little bit more focused on the zodiac. Um, yeah, it's beautiful. It's another I think pretty high quality one, but yeah, you can see the Greco-Roman influence on it. So for us, there's always been an influence of the cultures around us. It's always been an issue. There's always been a desire to kind of make sure that our time and the time of people around us are not completely, um, out of whack, if you will. And I think that to me, one of the things that those mosaics show is this kind of attempt to say, yeah, we have a different calendar, but it's not like that different. We're not that weird. We follow your same ways of marking months and I guess the constellations and the zodiac, we're really kind of the same. And so there is that attempt at trying doing that. And again, do we do that a little bit today when we kind of make Hanukkah a Jewish Christmas because they came at the same time? Because I can tell you, our ancestors would not recognize our celebration of Hanukkah. As you saw, it's not a biblical holiday, and it's not really was not in our consciousness. We're going to talk about the holidays coming up, as I said, looking at the importance of them and how they play out. Again, that takes those take some classes, and same with Shabbat, because Shabbat really tells us so much about the way we live our lives, which is to some extent because it's mentioned first. We're going to talk about Shabbat next week, and then get into the holidays after that. But what's interesting is that our priorities of making time holy is something that's really important to us. First, I actually want to share something first, which is an article that was actually written by Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory. We shared a lot of his pieces in our Wednesday night classes a couple of years ago when we were doing the weekly Torah portion. We 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 would we would share his Divrei Torah a lot. He was an amazing rabbi and lots of important. I met him before he was chief rabbi, but I did meet him in England. He was not necessarily the first. He was not the most obvious choice to be chief rabbi. A lot of people thought it was kind of an interesting choice to make him the chief rabbi, but he did a great job. I think people eventually kind of really thought he did an amazing job, and he's very much he's missed by lots of people in that country. But yeah, let me show you a piece that he wrote that I'm going to share up on the. I'm going to share this up um, on our place when we're done here. I'm going to share with you this article, or it'll be downloadable. Um, so yeah, my screen thing is not working the way I hoped it would. Um, so this is an article that he wrote about time, and specifically about. No, I'm just sharing it because I'm going to share with you a really important idea. Um, no, it's going to be up on the downloadable. It's going to be up on the. It's going to be up on. I shared it before you got here. The RTBA online, where all this stuff will be here. Um, it's the whole thing is interesting because he talks about how we don't really have a really. The West has made time to some extent not as holy as anywhere near as in the ancient world. Even though we had different senses of time, there was a commonality in this understanding that time was holy, that time was precious, that time was sacred, and people had holidays. We talk about holidays today in the West. I was talking with some people from Germany the other day, and they're just like, "Yeah, we celebrate Easter, we celebrate Christmas, but like they really couldn't they don't celebrate it for any religious reason." And you could tell that it was like we really don't have sacred time. And it's sad because even though we always had these kind of competing philosophies and theologies in some cases, at least people understood that time was holy. And the point that Sachs makes in this article is that we've lost that. And and one of the things that he says that's very powerful here is that actually the last part of this last paragraph says the life-changing magic of the Jewish calendar. Philosophy seeks timeless truths. Judaism, by contrast, takes truths and translate them into time in the form of sacred shared moments when we experience the great truths by living them. So whatever you want to achieve, write it in a diary will not happen. And live by the Jewish calendar if you want to experience, not just occasionally think about the things that give life a meaning. And I thought about that because actually the whole part about the diary was he was talking about why it's important to put things in a diary and not just put them on a to-do list. Um, so it's an interesting kind of philosophy and approach to time. But I thought, so it's a really great piece. And he wrote it about Parshat Emor, which is that chapter from chapter 23 of Leviticus that I showed you, right? Which is the story of how we get our holidays. And so this is Devar Torah that he links to that. But I also want to share what Rabbi Heschel says about time from his book on Shabbat, and we're going to talk about what Heschel said about um, about Shabbat next week. But I want to share a little bit about what he said about time. And as I said at the very outset, Heschel said, and it's in here in Shabbat, and the book is like 100 pages, but it's not really 100 pages. First of all, it's like really small pages, and there's pictures on some of these pages here, but it's not really. It's very hard to read, though. It's a short book, but it's filled with passages like this, and they're passages. They're more like I want to say like Zen koans, where you just kind of think about them, you kind of meditate on them, but and so it's not an easy read. It's 100 pages, but it's tough to read. But it has got some beautiful lines, and these are some of them that I took out of here. That I wanted to share, and you can see why, because they're deep. So Heschel said, "Time is the heart of existence. To gain control of the world of space is certainly one of our tasks. The danger begins when, in gaining power in the realm of space, we forfeit all aspirations in the realm of time." And of course, this is kind of what Sachs talks about in that article. I think it's a little bit, he gets into it a little bit more practically. But this idea that, look, we all know we exist in a realm of space where we want things, we want to acquire things, we want more things. But the reality is that time is really the most important thing. And time helps us really appreciate those things. And what he said is, it's actually the one right after this, but he also says Judaism teaches us to be attached to holiness in time, to be attached to sacred events, to learn how to consecrate sanctuaries that emerge from the magnificent stream of a year. I mean, that's just like a beautiful passage, but it's almost, it's like poetry of thinking about these big issues. But this is where he builds on this. About space. We must not forget that it is not a thing that lends significance to a moment. It is the moment that lends significance to things. And the higher goal of spiritual living is not a massive wealth of information, but to face sacred moments. And you understand that, even though he says it in a kind of very poetic and philosophical way. But what he's talking about, of course, is to some extent the reality that a lot of people have kind of experienced in the more materialistic ages that we live in, that it's really the experiences that we have. It's the moments that we have. It's the things that we enjoy in a moment that become really the significance in our lives. It's not the things that we acquire. And that's why a lot of people who have money have learned that it's not about, having money, but creating experiences, enjoying things, and traveling and doing things that are like he calls them sacred moments, right? I mean, that's very poetic, very beautiful. But sacred moments are all around us. And he actually says it. I mean, he doesn't say here, but he says it in other places because he talks about, his concept of radical amazement, which is really important for Heschel, where he basically says, every moment is a chance for us to be amazed at the universe. And so when we spend time with people that we love, when we travel and see something that we've always wanted to see, when we experience some concert that we've always wanted to hear this musician play, it's those moments. And again, you can call them sacred moments, or you can just call them really important experiences, or you can call them, I had a really good time. That's what he's talking about. And people have started to understand that a lot more, I think, recently, that they want to create that. And of course, people are now starting to market that to people because they know that's what they want. And they've come to that conclusion. So they're trying to get people, in whatever they're trying to pitch, whether it's a cruise or whether it's a, you know, uh, a television show, whatever it is, they want your time, right? They want you to have this experience. They want you to buy into their moment. And that's great because again, it's the truth. It really is the truth. And so when Heschel talks about this, he reminds us that our calendar and the concept of Jewish time is to make those experiences, to make them part of how we value our lives. So again, it's a pretty heavy idea. I know it sounds like, it sounds very heavy, but it really is something to think about because our calendar, our Jewish time, and that's in the Sachs article, both of these I'm posting, the Sachs and the Heschel quotes, they really do enforce what the Jewish calendar is all about, which is not, it's not just, we have a different calendar, we have different holidays. We have a different approach to time. We don't see time the same way that the rest of the world does. And it's partly because we've been around for thousands of years and we've seen so much that we say, you know what? We've seen that. We've been there, you know. But time is what we really have. And we're going to talk about it next week. One of Heschel's most beautiful quotes is that the Sabbath became our cathedral of time. Heschel famously said, that is our cathedral. And I really wanted to share it next week, but I'm going to share it right now. Jewish people had a very hard time accumulating things because they would get taken away from us. We had a really hard time building really fancy synagogues because people would burn them down. But what no people could take away from us was Shabbat, the cathedral in time that we created. And so we made the time so holy, so special, so beautiful, because it could never be taken away from us. So when he says it's a cathedral, Shabbat is a cathedral in time, he doesn't just mean it because, oh, it's a beautiful time. He means that treasure could never be taken away from us. Whatever they took away from us, they couldn't take that away from us. We're going to talk about that next week. Anyways, it's one of my favorite quotes about Shabbat and about what it is. But we'll talk about other great quotes about Shabbat. But during this time that we have together, we want to talk about some practical issues about the calendar because we're saving the practical for now, which is, okay, so we have this calendar and you never know when it is. We never know when Hanukkah is. When's Hanukkah this year, right? Or when's Rosh Hashanah this year, right? We always are wondering. Well, I will tell you. What? Yeah. So people are always saying, why is it so early this year, Rabbi? Well, I will tell you, there's a really easy way to know, and I will share right now, because I'm going to share this too, which is the read more about today. So this will be up there. Every week will be a read more about. So there's the Sachs article. No, This is actually a different Sachs article about the duality of time. This one's a little bit more obscure, but I also put a link on it for that. It's not what I shared. I'm going to share the actual article that I just showed you. That PDF file will be up, but this is a link to a really great article that he wrote about. Um, and there's a picture of him. This is, and Sasha, you can actually watch the video. Is he has a really interesting reflection on time as well. And this is a great article as well. The only reason I didn't share this one is it's a little bit longer, and I think what this one might even come across better as a video than the one that I shared. But um, but I do want to share back to this piece. Um, Yeah, there's online resources. Well, first of all, this is a interesting the Wikipedia article on the Hebrew calendar is really good. It's actually one of the best, like one places where you can read about kind of what I shared tonight about the Matonic calendar, about how there's that extra month uh, every about 3 years. There's great explanations on that. Talks a little bit about about the Babylonian calendar. Yes, yes, yes. Hi. Okay. So this is a link to this right here, which is Hebcal, because it's technically the Hebrew calendar, not necessarily the Jewish calendar, but the Hebrew calendar is what it's technically called, by the way, by scholars. This is the site that you need to go to if you ever want to have a date converted, if you want to know what time Shabbat is anywhere in the world, anywhere where you are. Yes, anywhere. California, Boyle Heights. I mean, look, anywhere. When I say anywhere, anywhere in California, even for, yes, you can guess it, right here. Santa Clarita, yeah. Let's go to Santa Clarita. Uh, I mean, everything's here. Um, so I went too far. Yeah, there it is right here. 705. So everything. So you can get, but of course, wherever you're traveling, it's going to be up there. It's going to have every country, right? You could be in Curacao and you can know where it is. So what time it is? So and there's a very old synagogue in Curacao, actually the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. So yeah, this is here on HebeCal. But what also is here, which is really great, of course, is a converter. So if you want to know, when that yard site is on the Jewish calendar, you can go right here and you can put in the date, you know, and let's say the person passed away on this date in 1972, let's just say, and you want to know when it was. There it comes up. So it's very helpful. I mean, look, if you want to know, and somebody tells you, I don't know what the Hebrew yard site is, then you can look there. Um, Hebcal, HEBCL, and I have that link. I'm going to get to that, Mike, because you're always sharing, and you're right. Because what's great about this wonderful site is you can also download. You can download from here the calendar for your Apple, Android, whatever you have. I'll just show you. I'm going to show you my calendar because, of course, I have Dodger things on there. I have Dodger calendar, but I have Philip Stolman's birthday. Yeah, Philip Stolman. But I also have the 3rd of Elul, right? Because I have the Jewish calendar, right? And there you can see the 5th of Elul, and there I got my dad's yard site, which is Friday. So I can put in the yard site. I put it in, and then it sends me an alert every year. So I can light the candle on that day. Now look, we put we give everybody the secular calendar. And this is what I was going to tell you. This is a perfect example of how this plays out. I was talking with you about this a couple of days ago, Esther. So again, I have it. Here's my calendar. You don't need to see on my whole calendar, but it's got the Jewish holidays. And of course, I do. Yeah, actually, I'll show you that on Shabbat. It'll tell me what the Torah portion is. There's Parshat Shoftim for this week, and it tells me, you know, it gives me the actual um, Torah portion, and it gives me the aliyot, so I can actually hear them. If I was on a trip and I wanted to hear the Torah portion, I can just listen to the Torah portion, and I can hear it and I can see it, and it comes right up there on Safaria, and I can hear the Torah portion, and there it is. It's actually not playing through the because I have the sound off, but trust me, here. That's our technology, folks. So I wasn't showing that up there on the screen. But yeah. So this is at a fingertip for you, and you can download the calendar and your yard sites right onto your phone or your computer or whatever, whatever device you're going to have that on. So it's a really great resource. It's been around for a while. And again, I didn't show it before for everybody. There's the Torah readings, and there's, again, you hit on the audio and it'll play the Torah portion. It'll also, it'll open up the link right on Safaria, which is the amazing online resource we use for Torah and for Talmud. It's got great translations. It's got, very easy hyperlinks, and it's ready to go. So this is from a practical standpoint, this is important. And it's easy for us to do it nowadays. The wonderful thing is how easy it is. And we have made amazing, amazing technology, which again, the Orthodox community uses too. Because the Orthodox community has all this stuff. They have these devices. And again, some of them limit what kind of content they can get, but they keep the Hebrew calendar app. So this allows us to keep track of it. But do people want to keep track of the yard site on the secular date or on the Hebrew date? I think there's a legitimate question there. And I think it's one where, look, I try to keep him, now that I have yard sites, unfortunately, to keep for my parents, I have tried to keep them on the Hebrew dates. But the reality is that I know from my own personal experience, it's the secular date that I think about. I do. Partly because my mom died before the day before my birthday. So can't think about my birthday without thinking about her dying the day before. But I don't think about my Hebrew birthday. I mean, I do kind of, but I don't really. I mean, I don't celebrate it on that day. My family doesn't celebrate it. So we make these concessions to the world around us, just like our ancestors did when it comes to the calendar. Look, I don't want to abandon it because part of my conceit is who knows what calendar we're going to be using 200 or 300 years from now. I'm not going to give up the Jewish calendar because if we're on the starbase whatever calendar in the far future, there'll still be Jews that are following the Jewish calendar and have figured out how to get their rhythm up on that calendar wherever they live, whether it's on a course, because that's the calendar we've been using for thousands of years. But Mike, I mean, from a practical standpoint, we that's why at our synagogue we don't tell people to not use the date. We if people want to put up the Hebrew date on their plaques, I'm looking around the plaques. Some people have the Hebrew date. I would put it on, but as far as telling somebody, well, you got to remember the Hebrew date. I'm not going to tell people that. It doesn't even make sense for me to tell people that because you and I, for the most part, we don't live in that world. Look, if you're my stepfather, Carrie died on Rosh Hashanah. Of course, I remember that. It's easy. But if it's not, if it wasn't on Rosh Hashanah, maybe if it's the week before, exactly the week before, a week before, it's yard side. But if there's not a holiday around that time, it's really hard to remember. And I understand that. It's not like you're living by that day every day. What? I know, I know.
Tell somebody else what their concept of should be.
Correct.
Big weekend and Labor Day weekend, and it's important to me that it was Labor Day weekend and what occurred then.
Yeah.
So I like your side on the English Labor Day weekend because that's meaningful to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. It's the It's the way. No, it's what I'm saying is that look, I can only tell you from my personal experience now. I get it. I never, I used to be, no, we're going to keep the Hebrew dates and only talk about them. Like, who cares? Like, who cares with the secular? But you do. You do. You can't. Yeah.
Calendar. So you showed us a text where it said that Shabbat is what God wants us
Mhm.
to acknowledge. Does he say, I'm sorry for my ignorance, does he say in there at some point in time about Rosh Hashanah?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he doesn't about,
No, because Hanukkah was too late, much later. So literally 1,000 years after the lines about Passover. So it's not in the Torah. It's not in the Torah. So that's why, and we'll talk about it. I promise you. When we get into Hanukkah, we're going to talk about it 100%. And we probably will revisit it when we talk about Jewish history at that time because it's super important.
But as I recall, Israel uses just the secular.
Yes, yes. But every Israeli paper will also print the Hebrew date on the top of the on the top. So every Hebrew paper, every paper in Israel, sorry, will also have they'll also have that. And it's because again, it's a matter of keeping it's a matter of keeping making sure people understand that, yeah, today's a holiday and, that's why we do that. What's interesting nowadays, especially since the advent of the internet, is that posting dates on articles is you almost don't see it anymore, right? You almost don't see when did the article come out. You should look at it, but they really don't necessarily give you a very clear indication of when this article came out, because the newspapers will now take out whatever article they want when they take like whatever article is generating buzz, they'll keep that up. They'll keep it up on the internet. And it's not like it used to be where, okay, if you want that article, if you want to run that story again on the front page, you got to run that story again on the front page. Nowadays, the person who manages, they tell the person what to put on the website, and that's where it'll stay there as long as they want. And if it stays up for a week, it stays up for a week. A lot of people are visiting it or hitting it, so they don't take it down. So it's really strange how, like, what is a story? What's new? I sometimes don't know. I say, wait, did I already read that story? I'm like, wait a second, that's from 4 days ago, but it's still up there. And the story below it just happened. Why am I looking at that story when that's the story that just happened? It's like, by the way, that's how time gets messed up for us today.
In the will put on their website a feature story that they will then have in their print edition on Sunday.
Yeah.
And yet they'll be reading it on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
And they'll leave it up.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm just going to show you. So the Jerusalem Post, which does put up dates, but it's very hard to see. I mean, look how small the date is. I mean, the date's there, but I mean, I can't see it. I mean, I'm going to make it big so I can see it, and it'll say when it was updated. But yeah, I mean, and it's first of all, the fact that they have to put an update means that it's probably going to be up there for a while. So yeah, it's not very big. You don't really see the date. You don't really see the byline or the dayline. And by the way, you don't also see the byline. I mean, you don't even know who wrote the article nowadays. It's not. I mean, no, that's true. Posted. Yeah, yeah. So that's how the news actually, how they how we're kind of, yeah. Yeah, when did you say that? One of the things I do want to mention too, as we kind of finish up about time, at least the way we have it today, is the Hebrew calendar, the way we follow it in the Reform movement, because the Reform movement consciously decided a few generations ago to go back to the biblical celebrations of the holidays where they're celebrated for the amount of time that the Bible tells us that we celebrate them. We will talk about it more when we talk about the specific holidays in the coming weeks. But in the Bible, as I told you a little bit ago, they knew that there was a different time in there were time zones. They knew that. And so when the Jewish community first wound up in the Babylonian exile, they wanted to make sure they were celebrating the time of the holiday at the right time, meaning the time it was in Jerusalem. Which, by the way, begs the question, when Jews are living on other planets, are they going to celebrate it during their cycle, or are they going to celebrate it the way it is in Jerusalem? It'll be an interesting question. And I think some people will follow the way it is in Jerusalem. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're on a planet that doesn't have a 365-day cycle, or wherever whatever moon of Saturn or Jupiter you're living on, you're going to have a yearly cycle for it. And the yearly cycle for it is going to be where it is in Israel. Because if you're on a year where it actually takes, 2 years or 2.5 years to move around the sun, it's not going to make any sense to celebrate a holiday every 2.5 years. You're not going to celebrate Rosh Hashanah every 2.5 years. And my guess is that people, even when they're on these other planets, they're going to kind of, maybe for a while, want to align time with Earth. But we'll see what happens. But I do know that the Jewish people made a decision to keep holidays the way they were in Israel. So they started celebrating a holiday for 2 days rather than just the one day that they had it in the Bible. The reason is so that they could celebrate it at the right time in Israel. And so for Jews who lived in Babylonia, they added an extra day for those Jews that were living in exile. So Rosh Hashanah became a 2-day holiday instead of a 1-day holiday. Passover became an 8-day holiday instead of a 7-day holiday, so that they would always make sure that they were celebrating it with the people in Jerusalem. So that was a conscious decision. Now, part of the reason why the Reform movement decided not to do that is because they realized that, number one, people weren't celebrating holidays for 2 days. They weren't celebrating them for 1 day. But they also realized that for Jews who lived in America, they're not celebrating the second day the same time that the people in Israel are. The people in Israel finished it a day ago. If anything, you should start celebrating it the day before. And no one's going to do that. It was always an extra day, with a couple of exceptions. One of the exceptions is you don't celebrate Yom Kippur for 2 days. Any fast day was still 1 day. And so they realized you're not supposed to really fast for more than a day. So we're not going to make people who live in the diaspora, which is us, fast for 2 days. So fast days weren't extended by an extra day. So Tisha B'Av is not 2 days. And there was this whole issue of, but wait a second, if something's supposed to be celebrated on the 8th day, like the last day of Sukkot, which we call Shemini Atzeret, if it's the 8th day, how can you have the 8th day that's also the 9th day? You can't make the 8th day the 9th day. And so they didn't. And so what they called that 8th day, and we'll talk about it when we talk about Sukkot, they called that extra day, the 9th day. They called it Simchat Torah. They made a holiday, which is the time we celebrate the renewal of the Torah, on that 9th day of Sukkot, because they realized we kind of got a jam here. We got to celebrate it. We want to celebrate it on the right day, but we're going to kind of make a new day, which is a holiday, and that's Simchat Torah. What? Simchat Torah. And we still follow it on the traditional schedule. In the reform, which makes us different from not all Reform synagogues, because a lot of Reform, not a lot, there are Reform synagogues that do it like we do, which is do it on the 8th/9th day of the holiday, the day of Shemini Atzeret. A lot of Reform synagogues, when they went to we're celebrating Shemini Atzeret on the 8th day and only on the 8th day, they made Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah the same day. So on a Reform calendar, if you will, that day is both, and you'll see that on calendars. It'll say Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah the same day. The traditional calendar will say Shemini Atzeret's the 8th day, and then Simchat Torah is the 9th day. In Israel, of course, it is the 8th day. It is the same day, but not for. Well, no, it's not the same day. It's the 9th day, but it's not. They didn't combine it the way we did, or the way the Reform movement did. By the way, that's important because that day was October 7th in 2023. That was Simchat Torah. So the day that Hamas attacked was a holiday on the Jewish calendar. It was Simchat Torah. It was the last day, if you will, of Sukkot. So people had the day off, which was critical, by the way, because number one, that's why the Nova Festival is that day. Because for secular Jews, and even not so secular Jews, because we had some Orthodox Jews that came to our temple who were at Nova, but it was a holiday. It was like a holiday weekend, if you will. And they were at Nova. But yeah, it was one of the reasons why Israel was kind of on low alert, but it was also one of the reasons why people were at the beach and were at other places where they were not at work that day, which is weird because what would have happened? I mean, how would that have been different if it had been just a normal Saturday? But it was also Saturday, by the way. So the calendar for us is, just to wrap up, is obviously one of the things, as I said at the beginning, that makes us unique. But it's not just because we have holidays that nobody else has and nobody else even knows about. Because I always love telling people it's a Jewish holiday today. And they're like, you're just making stuff up. You do not have a holiday today. I'm like, you know, we have holidays every month virtually, with the exception of Cheshvan. But it's also, what is the value? You know, what is the philosophy here, which is that we're making time holy. And one of the things that I always feel this time of year, in addition to a huge amount of pressure every night going, have you started writing? But then again, I saw Jay Siegel from CBS last night. We were at a meeting planning, by the way, a secular festival for Santa Clarita. Our next Jewish Israel festival will be February 1st over at the center where we did it last year, the Aquatic Center. But we were planning that, and we talked about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur preparations, and he's in the same kind of feeling like I am, which is, how do you know what you're going to say? Because I don't know what I'm going to say tomorrow, let alone 3 weeks from now. So it's definitely a difficult time to figure out what the holidays are going to be like. But no matter what, they're going to be here. And no matter what, we always feel this rush of excitement during this time of year. And just remember, this isn't a coincidence. This is why school starts this time of year, because it's the new agricultural year, right? Our schools were off during the summer and came back during the fall when we had farming kids. And of course, it's because for us as Jews, Rosh Hashanah and the season of the fall harvest happens right around this time, the last harvest of the year. Yes, Philip.
But, we
Yeah.
basically survived because he was away for the holiday.
Yes, he was on a beach in Ashdod. He was hanging out on the beach, and his brother was murdered defending the kibbutz. I think he feels kind of guilty about that. Yeah, yeah. Because no, I have it too. I posted it up on Facebook, by the way. If you want to hear that story, by the way, the Yarden, so Simchat Torah. Yeah, but he was on a beach in Ashdod, and he was telling his brother where the guns were to defend the kibbutz. The three or what? How many say? Oh, whatever. The three guys who got guns. So he had to tell his brother where they were, how to get it into the gun cabinet so that they could defend the kibbutz. So, yeah, that was a holiday, folks. And that's why Simchat Torah in Israel, I think from now on, is going to also be associated with that. By the way, interesting thing too, we're trying to plan what we're doing in Santa Clarita for the anniversary of October 7th, which this year, October 7th, is the first day of Sukkot. So we could not do an October 7th rally on that day because some people wouldn't come. Get into who wouldn't come. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's a holiday, so did not want to do it on that date. So we're doing it on October 5th. And I think I'll know more in the coming days. But unless there's absolutely no way it can happen, it's going to happen at City Hall again. Last year, the city council asked us not to do it there, and I agreed because I didn't want to cause a problem. But I yeah, I was there. We had George Whitesides and Mike Garcia both come. That was last year. I know it seemed like a long time ago. That was at Chabad. Yeah, so we did it at Chabad, which technically speaking is, it's a synagogue. I wanted to do it on a neutral space. The city wanted us to do it in a park, and they wanted us to do it offsite, and they wanted us to pay for the park. And I realized that No, in Beverly Hills, in several other cities. I mean, that's the close. L.A. didn't have something at City Hall, but there was, I think, Calabasas had something at their City Hall. So I'm not going to let them tell us we can't do it at City Hall again. So keep an eye. Don't know for sure, but I'm pretty much telling them this year that it will be at City Hall, like it was on October 10th of 2023. We did it 3 days later. Now we did have a little bit of an incident, so they knew that, and that might have been part of the calculation, but again, it should be at the city hall. It should be not at a synagogue. And quite frankly, I'm trying to make sure that this year it's not just Jewish people who come. So we'll see. And I think if it's at city hall, it'll be much more likely that people from the rest of the community will come. It might also be that we'll have some troublemakers there, but at this point, I don't really care. I'm not going to put anybody in harm's way, though. I mean, obviously, if there's something that's really dangerous, we're not. We wouldn't do it. So, sacred time, my friends, and the time has come for us to end. And as I told you, it would not be as rushed today as it was in the past, which it wasn't. Thank you, and hopefully it won't be in the future. So next week, same time, we will be in person and we will talk about Shabbat. And I gave you my best line on Shabbat, anyways. No, that's not true. The best line of Shabbat is yet to come. I think. I don't know. You decide. Yes, Charger tickets. They told me today, Jewish community at Chargers. And by the way, the it was nice to hear that Beth Shalom, Congregation Beth Shalom, is committed to Jewish community at the Chargers too. But I want the tickets real quick because I want to humiliate the Dodgers. I want to tell the Dodgers, you passed up Jewish Community Day, but the Chargers are having it. And I want it during the baseball season. Yeah. So they are. I said, how much longer do you think it's going to be? And they said, not waiting on anything from you. They're supposed to have the new mock-up this week. So they're waiting for the hat mock-up, which I shared with you, but it's not the official mock-up. That's my mock-up of the hat. But yeah, we're just waiting on their final mock-up of the hat. And they said that they wanted to wait on the hat mock-up. Yes. Well, they were up 3-1. He doesn't get the win though, does he? Oh, he does? He did it enough? All right. I don't want to get John upset because I've I've had this rabbinic argument with him several times. I do not hold the whole organization responsible for the current leadership. I know it's a it's a very Talmudic distinction, but it's one that works. I somehow have justified it, but I do plan on humiliating them with this, which is you could have had this, Dodgers. The first 300 of you get this. And by the way, somebody already said, it says in Hebrew, Barak. It is not Barack Obama, okay? Barak means lightning in Hebrew. It is not what Barak means in Arabic, okay? Barak in Hebrew means lightning, which is the motto of the Chargers, bolt up. Chargers look stupid on a hat because we don't have a CH in Hebrew, so it didn't look good. By the way, Dodgers doesn't look good in Hebrew either because there's no G, so they had to do a gimel with an apostrophe. Good question. I don't know. That's a good question. Right now, one of the reasons we don't have the tickets is because they were not going to guarantee me the hats by the game, and I said if the hats aren't there, there's no Jewish Community Day. No, I told them. I said I can't sell. We can't sell this telling you you're going to get the hat later in the mail. I'm not going to send out 300 hats, but it's only the first 300 people that get the hat, so they're only making up 300 hats. So that is incentive to get your tickets early. So we are doing it, and I really think it's going to be sold out. Or at least the hats will be sold out, and I think that it's going to humiliate the Dodgers. So I get two victories out of one. And next year, we might even do kosher food. This year, I said I didn't want to take on the responsibility of kosher food because yeah, stop. She's not going to be. She's not doing kosher food for hundreds of people. But we were going to get a food truck, and I'm like, by the way, we're trying to get a food truck for the Jewish festival out here. It's become an issue because the people we used last year, who I heard were good, they went out of business, and so it's very hard to get a kosher food truck. But next year, if this goes well, we will have a kosher. That's it. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be a kosher tailgate. We don't have it this year, but if this works, Yes, you can tailgate on your own. We can have an unofficial tailgate. We can definitely do that. We probably will. But to have the kosher tailgate, which I'm hoping to do next year, they already told us we could have done it this year. I was just like, it's just too much. I don't want to guarantee that too. Let's just get one under our belt and then next year. And again, get the Rams. Listen to John. I got the Chargers, man. They're neither one are owned by neither one are owned by Jews. Though I will tell you that the CEO of the Rams, Kevin Demoff, is Jewish. All right, guys. What? Cancel. All right. All right. We're going. Bye, everybody. It's good to see y'all next week.
Goodbye, Rabbi. Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Rabbi.